Welcome. Let's talk more about conditional operators. So in the previous video, I introduced the conditional operators, which we said is a way for us to combine conditions. Then I said that conditions are the basis to every decision that we make, and we formulate conditions in our code by using the relational operators, which all they do is they make a comparison of two values. So in this video, I want to grab all those concepts and actually use them to solve a real-world problem. So in 2 videos ago, when I started talking about conditions, I gave a problem. I said, should I wear a sweater today? And whether I wear a sweater today or not is based upon 2 conditions. And I said it was going to be based on, is it cold outside and do I have a sweater? So now in this video, which is also the first video where we actually write some code as an example, like we're going to actually write a little application to solve a problem, is that we actually want to solve this problem. I have a problem. I don't know if I should wear a sweater today. So I'm going to write code to help me determine whether I should wear a sweater today. So let's get started. So here we are in the same Learn CPP project that we have been using all along, right? So let me restate the question. Should I wear a sweater today? Well, for me to decide if I should wear a sweater or not, I have to consider 2 conditions. 1, is it cold outside? And 2, do I have a sweater? So we first have to formulate these 2 conditions. So let's start with that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete these, right? And actually what I'm going to write is I'm going to make the variable where I'm going to write the result. So whether I should wear a sweater or not. So I'm just going to call it bool wear sweater, right? So in the variable name wear sweater, if it's true, then I will wear a sweater. If it's false, I will not wear a sweater. And then in my input, I would say, wear a sweater, and then I would show the result. And if the result of this is true, then I will say, wear a sweater 1 meaning for true, 0 meaning for false. And so we want to find out what value goes in wear sweater, right? So that's the code we're going to write. So we said we need 2 conditions. So let's write some comments here. So condition number 1 is going to be what? Is it cold, right? We want to know if it's cold today or any other day. And then the second condition, condition number 2, is going to be, do I have a sweater? That's condition number 2. So let's start talking about condition number 1 first. Is it cold? Well, we need to write code to determine whether it is cold today. Well, how do we know if it's cold today? Like you as a human, what do you do to find out if it's cold today? Well, there are many different ways that you can figure that out. But one way is that you look at the weather app or television or wherever you get your weather news, and you look at the temperature, right? And if you see that the temperature is at a particular value, like let's say we're talking about Fahrenheit. So if you say it's 50 degrees outside, if you consider that to be cold, then you say it's cold, right? If you consider 50 degrees not cold, then you say, oh, it's not cold, right? So one thing is we need to know the temperature. And the temperature is what kind of value? Well, it's a number. It's actually a floating number because we can be like 50.3 degrees, right? So this is going to be a floating number. So I need to know 2 things so that I can ask the question, is it cold? I need to know what is the temperature outside. And I also need to know what temperature do I, myself, the human, considers cold. What temperature do I consider cold, right? So first, I need to know the temperature. So float temperature. And what is the temperature? Let's just say it's 55 degrees, right? I also need to know, and this is something that I decide, and if you're writing code, you can change this value to whatever you want. What value, in terms of Fahrenheit, do you consider cold? So let's say you say, if you see less than 60 degrees, you're like, that's cold. Or what is that number? So what I'm going to say is that variable, I'm going to call it the cold threshold. So cold threshold, meaning at that point, from that value on down, I will consider the temperature to be cold. If it's above that, I will consider it not cold. So let's just say that it's at 60 degrees, right? So anything below 60 degrees, I consider cold. Anything that is 60 or higher, I don't consider cold. Again, you can pick another value just to make it more fun, right? What else do I need to know if it's cold? That's about it. I just need to be able to make that comparison. So my first condition will be what? Is it cold? And it's what? It's a Boolean variable. So we said conditions are Boolean variables. So I will say bool, is it cold? Is it cold? And how do I know if it's cold? Well, if the temperature is below what I consider cold, the cold threshold, then it's cold. So if the temperature is less than the threshold, then it's cold, right? So this is it. This is my condition. Pretty straightforward. And I repeat it. If the temperature is less than whatever I consider cold, then it must be cold, right? So that's it. That's my first condition. Pretty straightforward, nothing fancy. So now let's go look at the second condition. The second condition says, do I have a sweater? Well, what kind of information do I need to know whether I have a sweater or not? Well, I need to know how many sweaters do I have, right? The only way I can know if I have a sweater is by knowing how many sweaters do I have. So the number of sweaters, what kind of information is that? That's a number. And particularly, that's an integer because you don't have half a sweater. I mean, I guess you can have a ripped sweater, but let's just say we have like whole sweaters, right? So that's an integer. So I can say int number of sweaters, right? And let's say that I have 2 sweaters, right? So I have 2 sweaters. What other information do I need to know whether do I have a sweater? Well, that's about it, right? If I have a sweater, if I have 1 sweater, then I have a sweater. If I have 2 sweaters, I have a sweater. If I have 3, I have a sweater. The only time that I don't have a sweater is if I have 0 sweaters. That's it. So my condition, which is also a Boolean variable, is going to be bool have sweater, just to not make the variable name too long. Have sweater. How do I know if I have a sweater? Well, if the number of sweaters that I have is greater than 0, right? Number of sweaters greater than 0, right? Because we have to be able to formulate this condition, right? So we need to use the relational operator. So here it is, greater than. And if I have a sweater, how do I know I have a sweater? Because I have more than 0 sweaters. And if this is true, then I have a sweater. If it's false, then I don't have a sweater. This will be false, right? Okay, so now we have condition number 1, condition number 2. Now here we go. We're going to write our decision. Should I wear a sweater? Let me put this, Should I wear a sweater today? Well, what I want to do is I said that I will wear a sweater if it's cold outside and I have a sweater. So my first condition is what? Is it cold? Is it cold? And how do we write the and condition? Well, we write 2 ampersands, right? So is it cold and have a sweater, right? So if it's cold outside and I have a sweater, then I will wear a sweater, right? So this will be true. If it's not cold, then remember, and operation, you require both to be true in order for it to yield a true. So if one of this is not true, if it's not cold, then I'm not going to wear a sweater. And if I don't have a sweater, then I'm not going to wear a sweater either. So if we look at these values right here, if we look at the information that we have the first condition, which is temperature less than cold threshold, meaning 55 less than 60. That's true, right? So the value of is it cold is that it is true. Okay, let's go check the other one. Number of sweaters greater than 0. Well, we have 2 sweaters. 2 is greater than 0. So this is also true, right? So now I have is it cold, true, and have a sweater, true. So true and true, it's true. So it is true that I should wear a sweater today. So if I run this, I should have, it should tell me that I should write, oh, this is huge. I'll make this smaller. Here you go. Wear sweater, 1. It's true. We have to wear a sweater. So that's it, right? We just wrote code to help us solve the problem of should I wear a sweater. You can use this code every day. You don't even have to think about it. You can just come in here, just don't think about it and just say, okay, what's the temperature today? Today is 65 degrees and I still have 2 sweaters because I still have 2 sweaters. I haven't lost any. I haven't bought any. I haven't ripped any or anything like that. So now if it's 65 degrees outside, will I wear a sweater? Well, no, because it's not cold, right? So let's run this. Oh, I'm not going to wear a sweater. Okay. Well, what if it's let's say now it's 50, but I lost my sweaters. I don't have any anymore. What happens? Let's run this. Yeah, I cannot wear a sweater. Well, then I went out, I went to the store that day without my sweater and I bought one. Now let's say I bought 5. Just for the sake of the example. And if I run this, well, now I will wear a sweater. So literally, you can now not think about this question anymore. You have a program completely capable of helping you decide whether you should wear a sweater today. And I know you might be thinking like, that's so silly, but this is powerful. The computer can make this decision for you. And if you think about it, this is how all the other decisions in a computer, kind of how they're based on. Bunch of conditions. You evaluate conditions based on information that you have, and you make that decision based on the results of those conditions. Ain't that amazing? I think that's amazing. Anyways, so feel free to change these values, right? For me, I said that if it's below 60, it's cold. But we can change this, right? Let's say that I'm like, no, it has to be below 45. Otherwise, I don't wear a sweater. Well, what's going to happen here is that 50 is not less than 45, so it's not going to be cold, right? So without thinking about it, I know that this is going to be false. So you can now come here, change these values, play with the number of sweaters that you have, play with the temperature, and also play with whatever you consider cold. And this code will always find you the solution, will always tell you if you should wear a sweater or not. And that's it. Now, if you have time, feel free to add a third condition. Actually, don't do that because we haven't talked about that yet. So in the next video, we're actually going to talk about what happens when we have multiple conditions, like more than 2 conditions. So in here we have 2 conditions. What happens if you have 5 conditions? What happens if you have a mixture of AND operations and then OR operations? So check out the next video. And then once you check out the next video, then come here and then add other conditions. What are other reasons why you would wear a sweater today? And you can make your code a little bit more complicated by simply adding condition number 3, condition number 4, and then the decision is based on, let's say, 4 conditions, right? So in the next video, we'll talk about what happens when we mix multiple conditional operators in one single operation. And then in the video that follows, we're actually going to talk about the selection programming structure. So in here, like I said, all this stuff we need to understand to be able to work with it. But we haven't even coded any selection programming structure yet. And so now that after we're done with the next video, you will have all the tools that you need to understand that. Then we'll go and talk about the selection programming structure. And in here, we just say, should you wear a sweater? Yes, no, right? But what about the action of wearing the sweater? You know, what if you had a robot that came and put on the sweater when it was cold? That's the part where the decision, the code within the decision comes in. So we'll talk about that. Well, we're not going to talk about how to code a robot, but, you know, the essentials to understand how will a robot put a sweater on you, then we'll start talking about that. Okay. We'll get there, though. We'll get there eventually, I promise. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment below. If you like this video, if you found anything useful, feel free to leave a like. If you're new to this channel, check out the series, check out the channel, and if you like what you see, subscribe, be safe, and peace out.